Good morning. I'm John Liston with Alberta Enterprise Group, and today we've got our guest, Art Maat, a CEO of many companies. I've asked Art to come and spend some time with us because I think what's happening is the entrepreneur is an extraordinary mind and an extraordinary community. And I think sometimes people don't understand the journey of entrepreneurs. Very often they see it when it's successful and think that this thing was easy. So I've asked Art to come in. I want to talk to him about his journey through a business of dirt and trees, and then has evolved into. We'll talk. Stay tuned for the end. We'll talk a little bit about driverless vehicles. And everything in between dirt, trees, and driverless vehicles. How's that for a description, Art? You like that one?
Yeah, no, it's you're on the right path.
So, we have entrepreneurs in our organization. It really is that's our primary focus is how do we help entrepreneurs and business people with a culture of free enterprise so that you guys can do what you do, which is create jobs, create GDP, drive our economy, drive our country. And so, again, I always say thank you to you entrepreneurs for doing that, because I don't know that you get thanked enough, and I'm not sure everybody understands enough what it takes to do it. I wrote an article that was in the Business in Edmonton magazine at the start of January, and it was about startup TNT and technology. And many of our members kind of reached out to me and said, John, that's a very interesting piece. I don't know how to go from my conventional business into, using technology more effectively. And, let's be honest, tech is going to solve most problems that we have, whether it's emissions in oil or whatever it is. Art, let's start off talking a little bit about where you started. You grew up in Thunder Bay. Tell us about that start and growing up in an entrepreneurial family.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. I grew up in Thunder Bay and was born into a family business. My parents were Dutch immigrants in 1949. My dad purchased a very small, I would say, garden center nursery of the day in Fort William back then, primarily running greenhouses. And I grew up at a young age of 6 years old, working in those greenhouses with all of the ladies that were planting flowers and annuals and all of that. I was the youngest of 6 children, so I had a fighting survival attitude from day one. And the greenhouse ladies used to hide me under the tables and protect me. I grew up in that environment, and very early I traveled with one of them to deliver flowers and plants all over the city of Fort William and Port Arthur, where we would be selling them at A&Ps and different places. And then at about 10 years old, I started to operate what we called the stand beside the liquor store in downtown Fort William. Was the flower sales guy. So I would spend my summer days there selling flowers in May and June, selling flowers at the young age of 10. So that's where it all started. I was born into the entrepreneurial environment in my dad's business, and really it just traveled from there. And then a book full of stories along the way of different things that occurred and life-changing moments and different lessons learned along the way.
So how did you go from working in your family business to running your own business? When did that happen?
So Thunder Bay lived there till 1981 and had a lot of different experiences there in being in business, including at the age of 12. We were selling apples, or I was selling apples, and we had an order for 5 bushels of apples that would be picked up on the Saturday. So I spent all week picking those apples, making the bushels ready. I had a sign out on the road, and Saturday came, and the buyer never showed up. So that was my first lesson in business: was get a deposit up front. It was the first failure. The inventory went bad, had a shelf life. So from there, worked in Thunder Bay till the age of about 21, and 21 was 1981. interest rates were sky high. My dad's business was really suffering, and myself and three brothers thought we would move out west and start a new company. My dad's company was kind of folding up because of the financial pressures, and we came out west to Alberta in 1981 to start over in Edmonton, working out of my sister's house in Edmonton here. And pretty well the day we got here, the National Energy Program came in and killed the oil industry and the Alberta economy at that time. So we survived in the downturn of the Alberta economy in the early 80s due to our fighting nature in Thunder Bay in the late 70s, working what we called out of town, up and down the highways from Kenora to New Liskeard, Ontario. I spent my youth working out of town and working 6-7 days a week in that environment. So as we were surviving and fighting in the early days in Alberta in the 80s, the other bigger companies of the day, they were tumbling down the hill and we were crawling our way up the hill. And because of our fighter mentality, survived. We weren't coming from the heyday of the Alberta economy. We were coming from the suffrage of Northern Ontario, and that gave us the ability to struggle through the 80s and survive.
It's interesting that you really are talking about perspective, right? The thought of it being a loss versus normal. And for those who too young to remember, 1981 was an extraordinary time in that the Alberta was just humming on all cylinders. And then this thing called the National Energy Policy came in, and interest rates, I think they peaked at like 20%. Was that the number?
Yeah, 20%, and people were dropping their keys off at the banks.
And so you guys formed a company called Wilco.
Yeah, the Wilco name came from. So when my dad immigrated to Canada in '49, he bought a business called Will's Nursery in 1951. There was a Mr. Will's, and there was an old sign out front that was at our yard for decades. It said Will's Nursery on it. So that Will's Nursery became Will's Landscaping in the '70s, and then when we moved out west, we needed a name, and we called it Wilco instead of Will's. Some of the connections from that early Will's company are insurance and bonding agents today are still from that same facility, that same business in Thunder Bay. So we've been with them for about 40 to 50 years now with that same branch, and we're the surety company. We're their longest client they've had in one stretch in Canada.
It's interesting. You think of those historical relationships, and to be able to even say we've been around for 40 or 50 years is extraordinary on its own.
Yeah. This year is our Wilco's 40th anniversary year. This was 2021, and also the 70th year since my dad started in 1951. So yeah, the legacy has carried on and continues to move forward.
So let's talk about Wilco then. What is the business of Wilco? What's the I like to refer to it as open source construction or open space. Not getting into technology. Open space. Do you want to talk a little bit about what Wilco does?
Yeah, Wilco is again, I keep going back to Thunder Bay where we grew up because that's where it all came from. Our ability to survive, to do, so to speak, to do anything, to be very diversified in what we are, gave us that ability early on in Alberta to tackle projects that were a little bit out of our scope. Traditionally, we are landscape contractors, with our background in Thunder Bay with the greenhouses and all that. That's what we are. And some people still view us today as a landscape contractor. But truly, we are a general contractor, or what we call an open space site development. So our projects typically have to do with open spaces, green spaces, environmental work, reclamation, earth moving, and we kind of fall in between the typical landscape contractors, that industry, and the big institutional or large commercial general contractors. So we do compete head to head with, the landscape contract community in Western Canada, and we also compete head to head with the large firms, the PCLs, Grahams, Listons. We work head to head with them, and then also the asphalt, paving, and concrete industry. We compete with them as well. So we're a really horizontal based company in scope. Sometimes we say we'll do everything from your large mass earth moving right down to plant and maintain your petunias, all in-house in one project, and all with our own forces. So we're very diverse in that case.
Now, when you say our own forces, your company, which is Wilco Northwest, at its peak in the summer, when you guys are humming on all cylinders, what would be the number of staff? Would it be
about 300?
300. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got 300 people you're creating jobs for. You've got projects, and I know you expanded into Fort McMurray. You have an office up there.
Yeah, we've been in Fort McMurray for over 25 years. And just a bit of clarity there. Wilco Northwest is my company, which is essentially Northern Alberta, Okanagan. There are 4 Wilcos. We were all one large Wilco company up until about 15 years ago, and then we typical family business, some a new direction, different passions within the brothers. We did a transaction to create 4 separate Wilcos. So today there are 4 Wilcos across Canada, from Thunder Bay into Vancouver, basically all doing the same type of work, but independently owned. And we work collaboratively with each other in terms of our supply chain and some marketing. We work together on that.
So when you're dealing with, I'll try to pretend like I know what I'm talking about. Yellow iron, you're buying together, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You've gone into Fort McMurray.
Yep.
How long have you been up there?
About 25 years. Early 90s, we started in Fort Mac. Primarily doing, I would say 95% of the site development work in Fort McMurray, all the new subdivision development, municipal park work, and some work up at the plants, some reclamation. We've been involved in some of the entry features up at St. Croix and Suncor, and we've done extensive work in Fort Mac.
And football fields and everything else. I know.
Yeah, football fields, Mac Island. Heavily involved in the Fort Mac fire reclamation process after the fire. And to this day, there's still work going on because of that. So yeah, we've been a key part of the community up there.
Now, I want to talk about that because this is where the entrepreneur mindset comes in. You get a call, the fires are happening and it's all over the news, and everybody's running from Fort McMurray, rightfully so. You get a call, and you and I were talking at the time. You literally sat down at your kitchen table over the weekend and went to work, solving this. These houses had been burnt down. Now we have toxicity issues. Mm-hmm. So how did you solve that whole problem? It was fascinating to me.
Yeah, we had been doing some work with the landfill prior to the fire in doing some overnight landfill capping with a product built for capping landfills that runs through hydroseeders. And 2 weeks after about a week after the fires were over, the community up there in conjunction with the federal government and the separate entity they set up there for the reoccupation, or I think they called it reoc, and there was another word they used early on. They recognized that they needed to cap all of the ash from the massive fires that had happened, and complete subdivisions that were burnt to the ground. So there was ash in the air, toxicity in the air. So they came to us on a Saturday, Sunday. They were working out of the fire hall. They had no means of proper communication. And between Saturday and Sunday, we negotiated a massive multi-million-dollar contract to procure materials out of the U.S., Wyoming, and Montana. A product called bentonite that we needed to blow through our hydroseeders on top of all of the ash. We had a very short timeline to do the work, and we signed a handwritten purchase order that they had sent to us on that weekend. And by Tuesday, we had 80 semi-loads of bentonite coming in from the U.S. and some additional purchased hydroseeders that we had. And within 3 or 4 days, we were on site with 10 hydroseeders, helping to keep the ash down and working inside the no-go zone to cover the entire site, all of the burned areas with this material. I called it a pizza crust we sprayed on. So any of the pictures that you saw that looked like a concrete film over top of the ash, that was a result of our blowing that material on there.
What fascinates me, and this is where I wish I was an entrepreneur, but I don't have that combination of first of all the genius to solve that problem, then the risk profile, because I would be going, oh my God, I'm committing to 80 semis coming across the border, and imagine trying to do that today with our border closure and how the federal government is making some mistakes. And so that whole risk thing is what really intrigues me, and that's where I want to kind of go with this thing. So first of all, that was a fascinating one, and it turned out to be just complete win-win, right? Murray got what it needed. You guys had a great contract. Everything worked very well, but it has a risk characteristic to it that those of us who don't have the risk profile would look at and say, I don't know, I'm not sure I can fix it. And the entrepreneur says, I don't know, let me see, right? It's kind of like, I wonder if I could.
Yeah, we were literally doing a bid on a napkin, Googling pricing on materials, right down to Home Depot for concrete mortar mix and different things like that. So it was a classic kitchen table napkin estimate that we did, and it was a lot of fun. And the risk, it seems that we are attracted to risk. It's fun. It gets the adrenaline going, and that's kind of, I think, the story of the life is being attracted to that risk for sure.
Yeah, you know what, Art, it's fascinating, and so many of our members are of that culture, right? And again, part of why Alberta Enterprise exists is to celebrate that, because I don't think people properly understand how important that is to our economy and our society.
Yes.
So let's go from there. You talked about at the peak having 300 people in the summer. How many pieces of equipment would you have at any point in time? Would it be into the hundreds? Or? Yeah,
no, we've got a couple hundred pieces of equipment, and 100, 150 trucks. So yeah, a lot of moving pieces. A big budget to take care of it all, and it's a going concern. There's no doubt. And being seasonal, we're forever looking at the calendar and looking at all of the signals out as we do our daily work. We're looking at all those risk factors of the seasonal work. As soon as back to school stuff starts coming out, we're in trouble, and then Tabor Corn shows up and you're really in trouble. And then it's Halloween, and life is almost over. And then if you make it to U.S. Thanksgiving, you're doing good, and next thing you know, it's Christmas, and we got to cycle again.
Yeah, you're bidding on spring jobs. So you've got all this equipment, you got all these people, and I want to talk about so you're running this business. It's obviously a very large going concern, and you've got all these assets. So you started to think, I wonder how I can manage these assets. So tell me about that mind and how it evolved into some of the technology that you've used?
Yeah, that whole program started in 1985. We were planting trees in Saskatchewan, and Saskatchewan being what it is, very difficult place to grow trees because there's no trees there natively. We had a lot of death on trees. Some trees survived, some didn't. And I literally started with the manila tags with a hole in them with that ring and a piece of wire, and I was tagging trees back then. And I had one of those number punchy things that you could punch, and a new number would show up every time you punched it down. So I was numbering all the trees and kept a sheet of the trees, each tree number and where the tree came from, who the supplier was, and when we planted it, to try and establish that certain trees from certain suppliers would live better than others. And if we planted in June versus July, and trying to establish a bit of a knowledge database on these trees to see if we could establish a trend with that. So the tree tracking on an individual tree basis, started 35 years ago, literally, in Saskatchewan when we were doing some work in Saskatchewan. So that evolved, from an internal process, went on for a number of years, probably 15 years, 15 to 20 years before we finally said, well, we should create some software out of this. And we had evolved into different technology. We were using barcodes and handheld scanners and things internally for trees. And around 2005, 2006, we started to look at saying, well, we could probably take this tree tracking concept and create a software product out of it and bring it to the industry that we were heavily embedded into, which is the Landscape Alberta Nursery Trades Association in Western Canada here. So we created a software product called History, HIS Tree, all about the history of a tree. So we created that product, we marketed it a bit, we had some difficulties with that, and right in the, I think we had one client, the city of Fort Saskatchewan, tagging trees and garbage cans. And one winter, I think it was 2009, my wife and myself had traveled to New York City for a little Christmas vacation. We went to see a concert, and me not being a shopper, my wife was in Macy's. And for those of you who have been at Macy's, there's a big square outside where typically the men sit, or you can sit and watch the people. And I had seen that on one of the boulevards there were some new trees planted, and so I walked over to look at them because I was curious about these trees, and there was tags on those trees, like a cargo seal you would see on the back of a truck, and on those tags was a number on that tree, and it said New York Parks, and there was a digital number on that tree. So me being me, I pulled the tag off the tree, put it in my pocket, and I said to myself, wow, I'm not the only one thinking about tagging trees. 2 years later, out of the blue, we got a phone call, an inquiry from the New York City Parks Department looking for tree tagging software. They had seen an article in a magazine, an RFID magazine, which we were dabbling in RFID at that point for tree tagging. They had seen an article about our work with the city of Fort Saskatchewan, inquired about our tree tagging software. So through a series of phone calls and processes, I was back in New York City at the Parks Department, right near the Arthur Ashe tennis stadium, right across the railway tracks. And we were negotiating and talking about what the history software could do for New York City. And at the beginning of the meeting, I said, hang on a minute, I have to show you something. And I still had that tag with me, pulled it out of my bag and put it on the table and said, I was here 2 years ago, pulled this off a tree, here's your tag back. But at the same time, I said to myself, I'm going to be back in New York City someday selling you our software, or at least that's what my goal was. And there we were. So that was 2012, and currently we're still in New York City tracking all of the trees that get planted. So if you're in New York City and you see a big white tag on a tree. Those are our tags, and they track all of the tree planting operations, the quality control, the mapping location, and everything all about those trees. So we've evolved a lot from our early days of tree tagging to what we're doing with New York City now.
So the tags, you said RFID, you got into QR codes, more out of just what's the best way to collect the data than anything?
Yeah, we started with RFID. This was before cell phones, before smartphones. And RFID, in fact, at one of our old offices, there's a couple of trees that have some RFID tags buried in them. We found they didn't work through some research that once the tree started to grow over the tag, we wouldn't get any proper transmission from the RFID. Plus the hardware for buying the handheld hardware for RFID, all of that, it didn't work. It wasn't a practical application. So when smartphones first came out, we quickly realized, myself and one of my sons, Mike, that we could use QR codes instead. And we started putting QR codes on tags and using smartphones and mobile apps in the early days to record and retrieve data from trees.
So New York, you got millions of trees now that you're tracking in New York. Did other cities pick up on this?
Interestingly, no. New York had a real passion. They had a million tree, they called it a million tree program for planting trees, and they were passionate about it. Like the city of Edmonton, most parks departments don't have the money to spend on that. We've tried extensively to market to other municipalities, and on a tree by tree basis, and it's a difficult industry to break into, or to educate that there's a real need to track trees on a per tree basis as assets, which kind of leads into where we've come from the history software. Trees as assets, when we designed our software, we designed it to accommodate a tree, which is a life cycle of a tree. It's changing, it gets diseases, it needs to be maintained, it has a location. It has some activities when you first install it for quality control. So we quickly evolved from trees into assets in general, and back to Wilco. We started to work with Wilco's assets in lifecycle management for assets outside of trees. So construction equipment, inventory parts, tools, all of that for asset management. So the original tree software evolved into a new product we now call Nektar, and Nektar now at Wilco does everything from fleet management, safety, payroll, data collection, quality control, HR management, scheduling. Basically runs the company.
Now, so let's talk about Wilco. So here you are, the owner of a business that is in the dirt business. Can I say that? Can I say dirt trees? And then you're in the technology business of meeting the needs, and it's probably one of your greatest strengths is that crossover where you understand the user need, and then you understand the supplier need or the supplier abilities to be able to meet those needs. So, what is it what's the data that you collected on a D8 or whatever piece of equipment that you had?
Yeah. So what we're doing with Wilco and with several other, dozens of other clients that we have, and we'll get into that in a minute here. But we'll do everything from, with D8s or dump trucks, we'll do everything from the pre-shift inspections, the safety inspections, the hours of work completed on a job that gets costed to a job, and then all of the when we're hauling materials in dump trucks, all of the cycle times of that material movement and the quantities of materials being moved. So basically, it's a kind of a digital twin of your operations in real time. Everything's being captured. Some of it's being captured humanly by data entry into the app, and some of it's being captured from third-party triggers that are coming in for load cycles and things like that.
So you're the guy that you've got working on the piece of equipment. They've got the ability to put the data in. Was that a struggle to get them to buy into data?
Yeah, there was definitely a real learning curve for operators, and a learning curve for even us as a company to adopt into using mobile apps and smartphones for data management. A cultural acceptance of being able to see guys on a job site with their phone in their hand doing data entry. There was one contractor in the early days we talked about, about doing this, whether it's on smartphones or laptops. And he says, well, that means I could give all my employees phones and laptops. And the response was, yeah, that is the point. That's the idea. So you can capture that data and you can have data as your tool to run your company for optimization and efficiencies, rather than working for paperwork that may sit in trucks forever, and working for post-accounting cycles, post-payroll accounting cycles that you're 3 to 4 weeks out of knowledge of what the real data is when you're trying to analyze production rates, productivity, employee production rates, et cetera.
Now, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It gives you great accountability. It also holds them to account, which for some, they weren't that interested in. Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%. We really talk about the transparency into the operations and the accountability of the employees themselves. And that takes a bit of time for them to overcome that. But once they adopt and are able to depend on the system is a real turning point when they know, when they do a pre-shift inspection, that there's someone on the other end who sees that instantly, that their truck is out of order and a work order is created and a service tech is sent out and everything is visible in real time, for the data itself, for the location of where things are happening. So there's a real transparency in that, that helps out the drivers, for sure. And that filters into safety and payroll and quality control and all of those different aspects of data in your company becomes transparent, and everyone, there's nothing left under the table anymore. There's full accountability, but also full reliability on the system.
Yeah, it still has that manual aspect where the employees themselves have to do what's expected of them. Did you have much turnover?
No, not really. No, we've never had. I can say we've never had people leaving because the technology was too difficult, and we've had everything from young kids at a high school, university to guys over 70 that are driving dump trucks and adopting to it. I mean, as time moves on, everyone's got a smartphone. They're all been using their smartphone, and we live on that. So we were lucky enough to adopt that early, both as Wilco and as Nektar as a technology company, to push that out into industry.
So, going concern with Wilco, and I go back to those tags in Saskatchewan that you're handwriting and hand recording, to a system, a database that works extremely well. Let's talk about, now you've got this product that works very well for Wilco and for New York City. What's it evolved into? What's the type of customer that's using it for? Maybe not exactly the same businesses you're in today. I don't know if you can share clients.
Yeah, you bet. So the product originally built for trees, and we tell that story all the time, because it was built for trees, very flexible as a platform. So we are truly a data management platform. When you first start out with us, the product is empty. In fact, when you engage with us as a consultancy. So we're not a SaaS. We're what I like to call, we're a ConSaaS, a consultancy software as a service and a consultancy as a service. So the clients we have dozens of clients who are similar to Wilco. They just sell a different widget, whether they're in earth moving, asphalt paving, or construction in general. But in addition to that, we have dozens of clients and some very high level marquee clients. We'll tell a few stories here, but including obviously New York City being one of them, but FLIR, Teledyne, the infrared, the world global company, Verizon Wireless in the US, Siemens, in conjunction with Keystone Pipeline. We're heavily involved in the Trans Mountain Pipeline construction, Saskatchewan Power, Ritchie Brothers, Quails Gate Winery, Florida Light and Power. So lots of high names, high marquee clients that we have, all leveraging what is our platform, the uniqueness of our platform, in that we can do any type of data management that requires lifecycle management.
So, sorry, I'm a bit of a red wine fan. Let's talk about Quail's Gate. What do you do there?
So Quail's Gate, as an end result, if you had access to our application, you could pull a bottle of wine off the shelf. You could scan the UPC code on the bottle of wine, and with the right permissions and data streams, I could tell you if the tractor that plowed that field 2 years ago, when the oil was changed. So what we're doing there is a full life cycle of the equipment, the fields, the harvest, the winemaking process, essentially everything in between, all the steps. So as the grapes are coming from the field, we're tracking the tonnage, which field they came from. We know everything about the field. We know everything about the tractor that was in the field. And then in the winemaking, we know everything about the winemaking process and all the additives and such that go into that winemaking process. So we're talking complete life cycle of the winemaking process. So
fascinating. Now, how long has that been going on?
With about 5 years. Yeah, it's been great. We're talking to a few other wineries now, and the interesting part is that exact same platform is being used in different configuration. For instance, with Verizon Wireless, when there's a disaster site in the U.S., fires, earthquakes, hurricanes, Verizon is there providing temporary communications equipment, and Nektar is fully embedded in tracking all of that communications equipment from a asset management inventory perspective, who the communication assets, whether they're cell phones or mobile towers or whatever, who they're being handed out to, which fire department, or the police departments or the community leagues or groups, or whoever has those pieces of equipment. So we're tracking tens of thousands of pieces of equipment for them, all in a mapping environment, GIS mapping. We can see where everything is. We can see where all of the service, the Verizon service staff are, where they're deploying the assets. So again, that's the same platform that's doing the trees, the construction equipment, and the winemaking process.
So it's an incredibly flexible and versatile system. Now, help me understand this, the GIS. So at the start, we know where a tree is, and we know where it's planted and when it was planted. Now we're into knowing exactly where everything is, and I think this is. Do we get into LiDAR and that sort of stuff now? How do you deal with understanding geographically where everything is?
Yeah. So in a basic sense, one of the features of the Nektar platform is telematics, GIS, or what typically people would call GPS on your vehicles. So telematics, it can be installed on assets, whether they're full-on battery-operated GPS devices or Bluetooth devices to kind of like the little Bluetooth tags to find your keys. We put that on construction equipment to find your construction equipment. But we can also put that on different things like these Verizon devices to see where they are, or companies like FLIR when they were tracking cameras and things like that. So that's kind of the traditional sense of seeing where things are. Then we get into mapping of vehicles, mapping of job sites, mapping of construction equipment. And as you're building construction sites, now you get into the mapping of the construction site while it's under construction, or even before it's under construction. And that gets us into the world of LiDAR. So Nektar saw an opportunity about 5 years ago to invest in heavily into the world of mobile LiDAR. And mobile LiDAR, yeah. So think think Google Street View, vehicle driving around with an apparatus on the top of the vehicle. In Google's situation, it's just cameras, or we think it's just cameras, taking pictures for Google Street View. With mobile LiDAR, it's a piece of equipment that is much more, let's say, expensive than cameras. And that mobile LiDAR is, when we drive through a street environment, it is running a LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging. So it's like a laser beam in lay speak that puts out a laser beam and bounces back and gives you a three-dimensional geospatial location of where that laser beam hit bounced off of a surface. So the LiDAR unit will have one or two LiDAR scanners on there, and will, as we're driving through a street, will give us about 1 million points or 2 million points a second in terms of, let's just call them survey points. So what we end up producing is a three-dimensional environment of wherever we're driving through, or in some respects, a digital twin of the location. So in simple sense, we can do earth moving operations. We can calculate, let's call it a surface of the earth moving operation. Traditionally, you would move dirt for a couple of days. You would go out with a surveyor and you would take a survey stake and you would take a location. You do it on a 10-meter grid. With LiDAR, we're doing that survey with a truck or a drone, and we're getting up to 2,000 points per square meter of that same survey. So with LiDAR now, we can do much quicker, much safer, drive through a construction site and pick up a surface of what's there and create a three-dimensional view of that surface.
So now we're into 3D.
Yep, big time.
And this is where this third company comes in, of Nektar 3D. It's a separate company specifically for that?
Correct, yeah. So it all ties back to Wilco again, with earth moving survey requirements. The construction equipment that Wilco owns, the CAT equipment, all have survey control, meaning they can cut to a grade if the grade is defined. Where the LiDAR comes in is we can pick up what the grades are before the cut is made or after the cut is made to calculate those volumes. So that's a simple use of LiDAR. We then branched out a little more into using LiDAR for pre-design survey. And a number of major projects in the Edmonton area have used the Nektar 3D capabilities of LiDAR to pick up the existing site conditions. So we've done about a dozen neighborhood renewal projects in Edmonton, where we go in and scan the neighborhood, like say Old Garneau or whatever. We scan it before the design, because there is no as-built from 50, 60 years ago. And we would scan that, and from that scan, we would create literally a set of an AutoCAD set of drawings that is all of the line work of that neighborhood. So all of the curbs, gutters, top of curb, bottom of curb, all the profiles, existing trees, sidewalks, the face of the houses, etc. Bring that all into an AutoCAD environment, and then turn that over to the engineering firms who use that as their starting base to redesign what the neighborhood renewal program will look like: new sidewalks, new streets, and things like that.
So I used to be a surveyor. I can't even imagine the time it would take to do a neighborhood or a project like that with traditional, theodolites and.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible. We do have to spend a little bit of time up front to do what we call control. We'll go in with they're not theodolites anymore, but we'll go in with total stations and professional survey team to lay out control, which is basically chevrons painted on the street. So we determine what that is. Think of it like a big quilt, and every point of the quilt is a control point. The more you have, the smaller the bubbles between the quilting seams, for argument's sake. So when the LiDAR goes through, we know what those points are, and it helps us tie down the LiDAR to do that. So we'll have those control points 100 or 200 meters apart throughout the subdivision at the street intersections and such.
Off of the benchmark.
Yeah, let's call them benchmarks. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
So part of the LiDAR team, another son, Taylor, he's the general manager of operations for Nektar 3D. And in addition to that, we've one of our founding members of Nektar 3D and Nektar 3D Consulting, another fellow, Solomon Gargoum, is our chief research scientist. And Solomon has a PhD in highway transportation data analysis using LiDAR. So beyond the, and because of these capabilities, people and equipment, or one of our marquee projects was the West LRT project that we completed for Marigold, the new one being built out to Lewis Farms. We built an entire as-built of that corridor right from downtown all the way to Lewis Farms. Again, producing as-built drawings of all of the streets, tree inventories. We put our Wilco hat on for a bit of this and sent our guys out to do actual tree inspections, assessment, health inspections. But all of that data was brought back into the Nektar environment geospatially. And then the design team, partners with Marigold Parsons out of Colorado, are using this Nektar platform and all of the associated data and AutoCAD producible drawings to now design and build the entire LRT project.
Again, I'm trying to envision what it would take to do that if you didn't have LiDAR.
Yeah, it would be.
It'd be millions of dollars, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and it's the dollars and the time. We had approached the JV, the partnership between between Colas and Parsons prior to even the bid closing and being awarded. And it got awarded on October 29th, 2 years ago. And the next day we were already prepared and we were out there doing the LiDAR survey. So we would beat the winter because we can't do it in the snow, obviously. So we were able to save them about 6 months of time by getting that survey done quickly in about 3 or 4 days.
So having a late fall was a good thing.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was absolutely great.
So now we have a dirt and tree company. We've evolved into a data management system in Nektar. We've now started to figure out how to map the world, right? And again, I think it's a good kind of explanation when you think of that car driving down the road for Google Earth, taking pictures of everybody's houses so that we can go on and but it's a point in time is interesting about that, right? It might take a picture in the summer and I'm looking in the winter. So let's now talk about where this can take us, the 3D mapping and the world of driverless cars, the world of just using technology to solve more problems. What are the next problems and calling and asking for help?
Yeah. So a couple of things we got going right now. We're in the early stages of a major research partnership program working with a very large highway maintenance contractor and one of the renowned universities in Western Canada, doing a research program using LiDAR to do change management in highway corridor analysis. Currently, the highway maintenance contractors need to drive the highway corridors daily, 2 guys, and need to make sure everything's still in place. So they literally drive, and one guy drives, and one guy's got a clipboard and a checkbox, and he goes, "Yep, sign, guardrail, sign," and they're making sure everything is still there. What we're doing is planning to do a base map of the highway corridor using LiDAR, and with our high-level LiDAR, and then at a bit of a lower level, using the existing highway maintenance vehicles to pick up LiDAR on a daily basis, but only in locations where they need to. to verify that the fact that the sign is still there, and they know the sign is there based on a digital map of that we've produced to indicate that the sign should be there. So now we have a database, a cloud database, and another in the moment cloud database comparing themselves to each other to look for change management. So that can be done for any type of highway infrastructure, streets, assets, in a street or a highway environment.
So I'm driving along the highway, I hit a patch of ice, I take out a guardrail and a sign. That you're going to know that fairly quickly.
Yeah, as soon as they, if we get to where we think this will go, the highway maintenance vehicle with LiDAR on board, kind of lower level LiDAR, will pick that up and notice that something has changed at that location.
And so, would this be similar, or is that what's being used by, let's say, OnStar with the General Motors cars, where they, somebody has an accident and they know immediately the car's been in an accident? Is that different?
Yeah, I think that's different. Those are kind of devices on board within the vehicle that, accelerometers that change. I mean, if you can use your iPhone as a builder's level, and there's an accelerometer in there that gives you that ability. Same in the vehicles, there's accelerometers that know when there's impact and things like that, or your airbags have gone off. So that's a little bit different. But the big thing now is when that sign is hit on a remote area, it's a liability to the highways department that sign is missing if there's another accident because the sign is missing. So we will use a lot of the AI and machine learning that Solomon's team has to pick those changes, pick those changes out. And in the same concept, we are also in early stages talking with a country in the Middle East to do the same thing, but now looking for things that shouldn't be there on a roadway, whether it's abandoned vehicles or garbage or whatever the case is. If we have an existing digital version or twin of a roadway corridor, if you continually scan that or have updated data, you can then start to tell what's different, what's different in the picture. It's like looking for Waldo kind of thing, looking for something different, looking for something out of place. Now,
so let's talk. We've only got a few more minutes, and I got a million questions. I just love this stuff. So now we've got roads mapped and all that sort of stuff. What is the premise of driverless, or being in your car and being able to put it on autopilot and it knows what the lines are? How does all that work? And is it legitimate to happen soon?
Yeah, right now the competing technologies are Tesla using cameras, supposedly, and the Waymos and the Google and other auto and a lot of different people using LiDAR for navigation. So the vehicle knows where it is. It uses LiDAR and cameras for some real-time awareness of what the surroundings are. But a step higher than that is building a digital map of all lane markings of all roads. So lane markings are designed into engineers design the lane markings into a roadway for specific reasons because they're legally where they're supposed to be. Well, if your vehicle knew where those lane markings were in a digital virtual environment, the vehicle could literally drive blindly, other than other vehicles or pedestrians or whatever. But if all the stop signs and all the lane markings and everything was in a digital map that was cloud accessible through 5G, then that vehicle could navigate between the lines, even when you can't see the lines if they're covered in snow. So Nektar 3D Consulting, we are working with Solomon's team, is working with let's say a high-level software company who's working with some top automakers in the US and Japan in providing that service. And we may be providing that service. We have a proposal to provide that service to using our AI and machine learning to find those lane markings and to build those digital maps of the lane markings.
So it's legitimately coming pretty quick.
Yeah, you betcha. Yeah.
And so a car will be able to navigate that, a combination of both with the data and observation. Like you say, a pedestrian walks across the road. Well, they weren't in any of the calculations.
No, and that'll be a different technology that helps that car. In Tesla's case, the cars themselves are doing the data collection, and those cars are not doing data collection for awareness of what they need to do, but they're also feeding back that data back to mother Tesla mega computer that is taking that data in real time from all vehicles, crowdsourcing the data and learning what the driver reactions are, and self-learning, self-teaching the whole process of what the cars are doing in certain environments at certain locations. You know, the car stops here all the time. Oh, there must be a stop sign there, or the car is turning here, or whatever the case may be. So they're self-learning. So a Tesla vehicle is a computer on wheels, but it's feeding back to mother Tesla all the time of what it's learning out there. So this whole HT mapping thing is kind of along the same lines, just from a different perspective.
So, geez, there's just so much potential when you get to that point.
Yeah.
Right? Is there other people doing what you're doing, or is this, are you guys extraordinary?
We like to think we're extraordinary. I do know with the machine learning and the AI that we're doing, which is a big deal. There's lots of AI going on in Edmonton. It's all about how you apply it. Solomon and his team, with there's 3 or 4 part of his team that are from the same university programs. They're doing AI on billions of LiDAR survey points. They're doing learning, they're machine learning, they're training. So they're taking an AI application, or they're applying AI to an industry. And what we're doing as a team is world-class, world-renowned in our abilities to do what we're doing. There's not many people doing it at that level.
Congratulations! It is unbelievable. We're coming up to an hour, and I promised you I'd keep you to an hour. You're going to bill me for your time. From a kid on the side of the road with 5 bushels of apples, in tears because the buyer didn't show up, to being able to map that same road many years later. It's a fascinating journey. Now, you've got PhDs working for you. Of course, you have a PhD as well.
A PhD in the School of Learn a Difficult Way.
It is. The journey is about, I saw a problem, I wanted to solve it. I saw a problem, I want to solve it. And it takes you amazing places. You didn't set out to be a technology guy. You just happen to like technology as a solution to problems.
Yeah, I've always loved technology. I left high school a year early, and here we are today. And lots of things happening. That's for sure. There's no dull moment around here. There's always something new going on.
So again, I'll go to all of our viewers. The entrepreneur mind is what I really wanted to kind of point out with Art and celebrate. He's not the best, the worst. He's just an entrepreneur who's trying to solve some problems. And in the process, he's continued along, and people have started to say, I could use that as well. And I think that's this risk profile of not really ever seeing something as a risk. It's always an opportunity. Yeah,
and it's practical. It's an application into pain points that other people we know are experiencing because we've experienced those same problems, right?
And that's the beauty, where you're able to bring those two together. And I spent time with Startup TNT and a bunch of these young, very, very bright people like Solomon and PhDs, and they know how to use technology. You think of our AI and Amy in Alberta. It's unbelievable. We're world class in having computers learn by data. But we still need problems identified, and so technology is just a tool. It's a tool in your toolbox that you go and get when you have this problem to solve. Yeah. So, Art, thank you for sharing that story. I marvel at the journey. I I marvel at what entrepreneurs do, and 300 jobs, solving world's problems. It really is an extraordinary journey for entrepreneurs. And again, I say thank you to all of you who are entrepreneurs, who are doing things. And Alberta Enterprise Group, our goal is to try and remove as many of the problems so that you guys can do what you do, and really celebrate the great work that all entrepreneurs do. So Art, thank you. On behalf of Alberta Enterprise, I'm John Liston, and that is Art Maat, president of Wilco, of Nektar 3D, and we'll sign off for the day. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.